Greetings! So today we are going to talk about the ancient technology of cob and how we are using it today in modern times, and how even today it is still a very valuable technology, very practical in fact, and of course super sustainable, which is a big deal to me. Now cob, like I said, it is super ancient, and basically as long as humans have been building structures or building almost anything of any kind, they've been building with cob. Pretty much all the most ancient buildings and most ancient building technology is actually some variation of cob. You know, in the Americas we had like all the adobe, and adobe is just cob that's made into bricks. And you know, in Africa and even in Europe, there's still cob buildings that are hundreds, if not thousands of years old. So it's really fantastic. It's really great for building homes and buildings, of course, but that's a much bigger project. And here we're using it in a very simple, practical way, which is how I'm going to focus this workshop, is these rocket stoves. And so we use these rocket stoves every day. And these rocket stoves, we use them hundreds of times. They're over a year old, and they're built from 100% earthen materials and our trash materials. You know, we've got some bricks and stuff that we use inside of these, but you don't even need the bricks. You can do them just out of the cob themselves. They work really, really well. If you don't know anything about rocket stoves, these are rocket stoves, and we're building them out of cob. We're utilizing the technology of cob to also utilize the technology of rocket stoves. And the reason why they work so well is because you've got these long burn chambers here, and then they're in these L shapes. So you get these long burn chambers, and they're all super insulated. So the fire gets really hot. It gets way hotter than a normal campfire. What happens then is that you are able to combust more of the hydrocarbons, which oftentimes looks like smoke or is smoke. So you get hotter flame, you get more flame, and you get less smoke. So they're really good for cooking. They're way superior to just sort of an open flame or a campfire or something like that. It also creates its own draft, you know, because it's got the heat and the flames are coming out up the top of thermodynamics. It also is sucking in air from here, so it's creating its own fuel. And oxygen is one of the keys to good fire. Oxygen is actually burning. It's actually combusting with the sticks or the wood or whatever it is that you're burning as well. So not only do you need it to burn, but oxygen itself is burning, and the more oxygen flow you have, the better flame you have. So the rocket stove technology is really fantastic. We cook thousands of meals on these things. Now you can coat these with some sort of like a lime plaster or even some kind of a cement, and they're going to last longer. But we've got these outdoors here in our outdoor kitchen, and they do fall apart. They fall apart, you know, kids climb on them. You know, we get rain, we get moisture, you know, we use them, so they start to crack. Also the heat, the constant heat of the fire and the cooling, you know, especially in the winter, it gets hot and it gets cold, so it starts cracking. So just the natural use is going to create a lot of wear and tear. But again, we built this in the matter of a day, and it's all out of free materials. And so what we're going to be doing in this workshop is we're actually just going to be repairing this rocket stove. We don't even have to totally rebuild it. All we need to do is patch it and repair it. So we've got chunks of cob falling off here, as you see. But we just need to repair it so that it's airtight, right? So that it's super efficient and so that it's strong. Now, cob is a really fantastic technology, like I said. And the reason why is because it's super strong and it's super insulatory. And also because it's made out of just a few ingredients, a few materials, which are basically, you know, abundantly available, sustainable resources almost anywhere on Earth. So to make cob, all we do is we take the proper mixture of sand, clay, water, and straw. So, you know, it depends on what your clay source is and what your sand source is. Most clay is going to have some kind of sand in it. So, you know, you take that into account, but basically you're looking at, you know, almost a 50-50 ratio of pure clay to pure sand. A little bit less sand than that oftentimes. Again, it depends on what kind of clay you're using. once you get good with cob, you sort of figure out what the ideal consistency is, but you do have some room to work with. The worst case scenario is if you have too much clay in there, it's going to be a little bit more prone to cracking, but it's still going to kind of work. If it's got too much sand, it's going to be a little bit more softer, and it's going to be more prone to sort of like dissolving off. Either way, you still got a medium there that you can work with for experimentation to still get some degree of success. So all we do is we take some clay and some sand. Ideally, you want to, have that be clean clay and clean sand, meaning you don't want sticks and leaves and sort of biodegradable matter in there. And then you're going to mix that with water so that you make it into a, not a sloshy substance. You want it to be, you want to be able to sort of mix it into a ball, and it's going to stay in a ball. But you want it moist enough to where, it's squishy. So sort of like a Play-Doh consistency. And then once you get that, then you add straw to it. And what's going to happen is the clay and the sand dry, and the straw is what holds it all together and keeps it super strong, actually. The straw is basically serving the purpose as a rebar in modern day cement. So when you lay a road or a foundation or a driveway or whatever that is, you first, build like sort of the wood frame, that you're going to pour the cement into, but then you put rebar in the bottom, and then you pour that cement, and it dries. But the rebar is actually what's really bringing it all together, holding it all together, and making it strong. So the rebar is a really critical part of cement technology. With this cob, what we're doing is using the straw, and that's basically serving the purpose as the rebar. So the straw is intermingling, interconnecting, interweaving all the body of the clay and the sand into one sort of a whole mass. It becomes one sort of interconnected piece, and that's what really holds it together. Now, especially when we have the bricks that we use as sort of the inner foundation, and then put the cob around it to hold it all together and super insulate it, it's even better because the bricks don't have any of that straw in it, and therefore are a little less prone to burning. When you have the straw and you don't have the bricks, you normally need to do some sort of just like a pure clay and sand sort of paste or plaster on the inside, so that you don't have the super heat sort of combusting the straw on the inner layers. But other than that, it's still fireproof. Even with the straw, it's still fireproof. So the basics of cob, like I said, is clay, sand, straw, water. You mix it together into that perfect ratio, which does have some room, and it also has variation depending on how you're wanting to use it. You can potentially have some sort of gravel or stone in there if you're doing more of like a wall foundation. If you're doing more like a smooth plaster, you want it to be sort of fine and filtered out so that there's no gravel or rocks or things like that in there. And all we do is, like I said, you just, it's just like working with clay. It's like making a sculpture, right? We just add it to where we want, we get it the shape we want, we smooth it out, and then we let it dry. Depending on the humidity in the air, the sun, all these various factors, it'll dry in a few hours, a few days. Generally speaking, you do want it to dry on the little bit of the slower side. It has more prone to cracking if it's, drying out in the hot sun. So sometimes, if it's a hot, dry day, you put some sort of a tarp over it and take it off at night so that it can dry slower at night versus during the day. You do have to protect it from rain. If you do not use some sort of a cement or lime plaster, you have to protect the outer layers from rain, otherwise it will, sort of wash away fairly quickly. What we do is we just cover them with tarps. That way we don't have to spend the extra resources and time putting a plaster on here. We just cover it with tarps whenever we're not using them, and it keeps it in relatively fine shape. Like I said, as you can see, it's degrading, but most of that's not because of the rain. That's really just because of the constant heating and cooling and just the everyday, wear and tear that we put on this from how much we use it. But we just cover it with tarps and let it go. So we are going to harvest some clay, we're going to harvest some sand, we're going to harvest some straw, and we are going to make some cob, and then we are going to patch these rocket stoves so that they're sort of like new, and it's even faster than it is, building it from the ground up. The other really cool thing is that what I've actually done with these before when they get in real bad shape is I can actually knock them down, and I can actually take, you know, these old chunks of cob here, and I can rehydrate them, remix them, and reuse them again. So that's another really great thing about this cob technology, is that there's really no such thing as waste. There's no such thing as trash. It doesn't really ever get destroyed. I can rehydrate it, I can remix it, and reuse it. And on top of that, if, for example, I were to just let it degrade into nothing and not repair it, over time, it would just dissolve right back into the earth. It would dissolve right back into the earth, and it would turn right back into what it was before we dug it up, before we mixed it, and before we made something out of it. And that's something that I really love, because in modern culture, everything we make, everything we build, for the most part, has all of these, you know, waste products, these these byproducts of waste. You know, plastic obviously is a huge problem. When, you know, you have it, when you're done using it, it doesn't decompose. It doesn't decompose. It just turns into smaller particles, and it's this really huge problem. So there's a lot of waste. When we knock something down or it gets old, you know, it just goes to the landfill, we throw it away. And this is a huge problem. And that's one of the beautiful things about this, is not only is it abundantly free, sustainable materials to begin with, but when you're done with it, the trash, the byproduct, the waste of it is just the land itself, and it turns right back into the land. So it's an ancient technology. It's super valuable technology even today, and it's really one of the most sustainable technologies you'll possibly find. And not only can you build something as nice as a, you know, a family home worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that will last for hundreds of years, that you don't need to pay to heat, you don't need to pay to cool, it's earthquake proof, fire proof, you know, hurricane proof, tornado proof, it's superior in every way. But if you knock the house down, it'll just dissolve right back into the earth, and it'll become exactly what it was before you built it, harvested it, processed it to begin with. And this is the full spectrum benefit of why I love cob so much. So let's get into it.